Everyone came to celebrate the Mafia Boss's wedding, but by the end of the night, they would remember the moment everyone left him behind. The grand hall was filled with elegant decorations, quiet conversations, and expectations of a perfect beginning. Alexander Whitmore had built a life where everything followed a plan. As the head of the Whitmore organization, he was known as a man who could handle any challenge. People respected his intelligence, his discipline, and his ability to remain calm under pressure. But on this night, surrounded by hundreds of guests, Alexander faced something he never expected. He was alone. The woman who was supposed to stand beside him had made her decision before the ceremony could begin. She looked at the future ahead and saw only difficulties. She saw his changed life after the accident, the wheelchair that now represented a part of his daily reality, and the responsibilities that came with his name. Instead of seeing the man he had always been, she only saw what she believed he had lost. One by one, the excitement in the room disappeared. Guests found reasons to leave. Conversations became whispers. The celebration that was meant to represent a new chapter slowly became a reminder of everything Alexander feared. For years, he had been the person everyone depended on. He had been the man with answers, the man who never showed uncertainty. But sitting there in the quiet hall, Alexander felt something he rarely allowed himself to admit. He felt forgotten. He wondered if people only valued him when he appeared unstoppable. He wondered if the respect he received was connected only to his power and influence. Then, when the room was almost empty, someone remained. Jasmine Carter had worked at the Whitmore estate for years. She was a maid whom many people overlooked because she never sought attention. She was not part of the powerful circles surrounding Alexander. She did not come from wealth or status, but she had something many people around him lacked. She saw people for who they were. Jasmine slowly walked toward Alexander, not with pity, but with genuine concern. She did not look at him like he was broken. She did not treat him like a symbol of tragedy. She simply saw a man sitting alone on a difficult night. Alexander looked at her with surprise. He expected sympathy from people who felt sorry for him. He expected uncomfortable silence from those who did not know what to say. But Jasmine offered something completely different. She offered normal conversation. She offered respect. And then she smiled gently and said something that made him question everything he believed about his future. "Shall we dance?" For a moment, Alexander thought he had misunderstood her. The idea seemed impossible. Not because of the situation, but because nobody had looked at him that way in a long time. Nobody had treated him as if he was still someone who could experience joy. Jasmine was not trying to fix his life. She was not trying to become important. She was simply reminding him that one difficult moment did not define his entire story. And in that nearly empty wedding hall, the woman everyone overlooked became the first person to make Alexander Whitmore wonder if his life was not ending, but beginning again. After the unforgettable moment in the empty wedding hall, Alexander Whitmore expected the feeling of surprise to disappear by morning. He believed the kindness shown by Jasmine Carter was simply a rare moment during a difficult night. But as the days passed, he found himself remembering her words and the way she looked at him. She had not seen the wheelchair first. She had not seen the reputation that followed his name. She had simply seen him. For a man who spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him, that small act of understanding felt more meaningful than he wanted to admit. Jasmine returned to her usual responsibilities at the Whitmore estate, never expecting anything from Alexander. She did not behave differently because of what happened. She did not tell others about the private moment they shared. She simply continued her work with the same patience and kindness she had always shown. That surprised Alexander more than anything. Many people changed their behavior when they realized they had his attention. Jasmine did not. She treated him with the same respect she gave everyone else. One afternoon, Alexander asked Jasmine why she had stayed when everyone else left. The question was simple, but it carried years of disappointment behind it. Jasmine thought carefully before answering. She told him that she did not stay because she felt sorry for him. She stayed because she believed everyone deserved kindness during difficult moments. Her answer stayed with Alexander because it was something he rarely experienced. People often respected his position, but Jasmine respected him as a person. Slowly, Alexander began noticing the details about Jasmine that others overlooked. She was always willing to help, not because she wanted praise, but because caring for others was part of who she was. She carried herself with confidence despite living in a world where many people judged her by appearances before knowing her heart. Alexander realized that Jasmine possessed a strength he admired. She had experienced being overlooked, yet she never allowed that to make her bitter. Meanwhile, Jasmine started seeing another side of Alexander. She discovered that behind the powerful image was someone who had spent years carrying responsibilities alone. He was not used to asking for help. He was not comfortable showing uncertainty. He believed he had to remain strong for everyone around him. But Jasmine noticed the moments when he became quiet, the moments when he seemed tired from always being the person others depended on. She never pushed him to talk. She simply made it clear that he did not have to pretend around her. Their conversations became longer. Their silence became more comfortable. What started as a single unexpected question in a wedding hall slowly became a connection built on trust. Alexander still struggled with accepting his new reality, but Jasmine reminded him that his life was not defined by one change. He was still intelligent, respected, and capable of making a difference. The wheelchair was part of his journey, but it was not the measure of his worth. For the first time since his accident, Alexander began considering the possibility that he could still have a meaningful future. And the woman who offered him a simple dance was becoming the person who helped him remember that he was more than the things he had lost. As the weeks passed at the Whitmore estate, the connection between Alexander Whitmore and Jasmine Carter continued to grow in ways neither of them expected. What started as a single moment of kindness became a quiet friendship built on honesty and understanding. Alexander had spent years surrounded by people who carefully chose their words around him. Some admired his influence, some respected his position, and others simply wanted to remain close to his power. But Jasmine was different. She never changed her behavior because of his name. She spoke to him naturally, laughed with him, and treated him like a person rather than a title. That difference made Alexander curious about her life. One afternoon, while looking through some documents in his office, Alexander noticed Jasmine organizing a small collection of books she had borrowed from the estate library. He asked about her interests, expecting a simple answer, but he discovered that Jasmine had always loved learning and helping others. She explained that growing up, she was often reminded of what she lacked instead of what she could become. People noticed her appearance before noticing her intelligence. They judged her before understanding her. Yet she refused to let those opinions decide her future. Alexander listened carefully because he understood that feeling more than anyone. He had been judged too, but for different reasons. People saw his wealth, his reputation, and his position, but they rarely saw the effort and responsibility behind them. In that moment, they realized they had something important in common. Both of them knew what it felt like to be seen only through one part of their identity. Jasmine saw the person behind the powerful image. Alexander saw the confidence behind the woman others overlooked. Their conversations slowly became a place where both of them could be honest. Alexander admitted that after his accident, he struggled with the idea that his life had changed forever. He worried that people would only remember what he could no longer do instead of everything he was still capable of doing. Jasmine reminded him that everyone experiences moments when life changes unexpectedly. The important thing was not pretending nothing happened. The important thing was choosing what came next. Her words encouraged Alexander to look at his future differently. Meanwhile, Alexander began encouraging Jasmine to recognize her own abilities. He noticed how naturally she connected with people and how much respect the estate staff had for her. He told her that kindness was not something small. It was a quality that could influence an entire environment. Jasmine smiled because she was not used to hearing people describe her strengths. She had spent so much time proving she deserved respect that she forgot she already had it. Their friendship became something the people around them began noticing. The staff saw how Alexander seemed more relaxed when Jasmine was nearby. They noticed that the man who once kept everyone at a distance was beginning to open himself to connection again. But Alexander also understood that his feelings toward Jasmine were becoming deeper than simple gratitude. He did not appreciate her because she stayed when others left. He appreciated her because she reminded him of the person he had been before disappointment changed him. Jasmine had not entered his life to repair what was broken. She had entered his life to show him that he was never truly broken at all. As the days turned into months, Alexander Whitmore began noticing that his life was changing in ways he never expected. The difference was not something dramatic that happened overnight. It was found in small moments. He started enjoying conversations that were not about business or responsibilities. He started looking forward to mornings when Jasmine Carter would enter the room with her calm smile and remind him that the day could hold something positive. For years, Alexander had measured his life through achievements, control, and the ability to solve problems. But Jasmine showed him that happiness could exist in simple moments that had nothing to do with power. One evening, Alexander and Jasmine sat together in the estate garden. The quiet atmosphere gave them a chance to talk about things they rarely shared with others. Alexander admitted that before his accident, he believed he understood exactly what his future would look like. He had a clear path, a clear identity, and a clear image of who he was supposed to be. But after his life changed, he felt like he had lost the person he used to know. Jasmine listened carefully and told him that sometimes people spend so much time trying to return to the past that they forget they can create something new. Her words made Alexander think deeply. He realized that he had been comparing his present life to a version of himself that no longer existed. Instead of accepting the person he was now, he had been focusing on everything he believed he had lost. Jasmine helped him understand that his value was never connected to his ability to walk. It was connected to his character, his choices, and the way he treated others. Alexander was surprised by how easily Jasmine saw things he had struggled with for so long. She did not dismiss his challenges, but she also refused to let those challenges become the only thing that defined him. Meanwhile, Alexander learned more about Jasmine's own struggles. He discovered that she had spent years being underestimated because of her appearance and background. People often assumed they knew her before hearing her story. They saw a maid instead of a woman with dreams, intelligence, and determination. Alexander told her that he found it remarkable that she remained kind despite being treated unfairly. Jasmine simply replied that kindness was a choice she made for herself, not a reward she gave to others. That answer stayed with him. He admired that Jasmine's strength came from within. She did not need approval from anyone to know her worth. As their connection grew stronger, the people around them began to notice the change. Alexander, who once avoided personal conversations, now allowed himself to share his thoughts. He became more patient and more open. The staff at the estate saw that Jasmine had brought a sense of warmth into a place that had always felt formal and distant. However, Alexander also knew that his feelings for Jasmine were becoming more complicated. He was no longer grateful only because she had stayed when others left. He admired her because she had shown him a different way to see himself. For the first time in years, Alexander was not thinking about what he had lost. He was thinking about what he could still build. And Jasmine, the woman who everyone once overlooked, was becoming the person who reminded him that a new beginning could come from the most unexpected places. The relationship between Alexander Whitmore and Jasmine Carter had reached a point where both of them began noticing how much they had changed. What started with a simple question in an empty wedding hall had slowly become a connection neither of them wanted to lose. Alexander, once convinced that people only stayed close because of his influence, was beginning to understand what genuine care looked like. Jasmine never treated him differently because of his wealth, his reputation, or the challenges he faced. She valued the person behind everything the world noticed first. One afternoon, Alexander attended an important gathering at the Whitmore estate. It was the kind of event where people carefully chose their words and appearances mattered more than honesty. Many guests recognized Alexander as a powerful figure, but they also noticed the woman beside him. Some were surprised that Jasmine was included in such a setting. They questioned how someone from a simple background could stand beside a man like Alexander. Jasmine heard the whispers, but she remained calm. She had spent years being judged before people understood her, and she refused to let old experiences control her confidence. Alexander noticed her strength immediately. He knew that many people expected him to speak for her, but he also knew Jasmine did not need someone to give her a voice. She already had one. Later that evening, Alexander asked Jasmine if the comments had bothered her. She admitted that they did not make her feel comfortable, but she had learned that other people's opinions did not define her. She explained that she once spent too much time trying to prove she deserved respect. Now, she focused on living in a way that reflected who she truly was. Alexander admired her honesty because he understood that feeling. He had spent years proving himself to others as well. The difference was that Jasmine had learned to accept herself before the world accepted her. That lesson meant more to him than she realized. As their bond continued to grow, Alexander began sharing more about his past. He told Jasmine about the person he used to be before his accident and how difficult it had been to adjust to a different reality. He admitted that he sometimes wondered if people still saw him the same way. Jasmine looked at him and reminded him that the people who truly mattered never measured him by what changed. They measured him by his heart, his decisions, and the way he treated others. Those words gave Alexander a sense of peace he had not felt in a long time. Meanwhile, Jasmine began discovering that Alexander's world was not as cold as she once imagined. She saw how much responsibility he carried and how many people depended on his decisions. She realized that his strength was not only shown through authority. It was shown through patience, discipline, and the effort he made to care for others. For the first time, Alexander allowed himself to imagine a future where he was not defined by his past or his limitations. He began seeing Jasmine not only as the person who stayed when everyone else left, but as the person who helped him believe that his life could still hold unexpected happiness. And Jasmine slowly realized that the man everyone feared was also the man who made her feel truly seen. As the connection between Alexander Whitmore and Jasmine Carter continued to grow, both of them began realizing that their lives had changed in ways they never expected. Alexander had spent so many years building walls around himself that he almost forgot what it felt like to let someone truly know him. He was used to being the person others depended on, the person who always had control, and the person who never showed uncertainty. But with Jasmine, he discovered that honesty did not make him weaker. It made him feel free. Jasmine never asked Alexander to forget his challenges. She never pretended that his life had not changed. Instead, she reminded him that a different life could still be a meaningful one. One morning, Alexander asked Jasmine to join him for a quiet breakfast in the garden. It was a simple moment, but for him, it represented something important. Before meeting her, he avoided situations where people might focus on what had changed about him. He often believed that others were watching him closely, searching for signs that he was no longer the same man. But Jasmine never looked at him that way. She talked about ordinary things, shared stories from her day, and made him feel comfortable being himself. During their conversation, Alexander opened up about the days after his accident. He admitted that the hardest part was not learning a new routine. The hardest part was seeing how quickly some people changed their attitude toward him. People who once praised him suddenly treated him differently. He felt as if they were no longer seeing Alexander Whitmore, but only the circumstances surrounding him. Jasmine listened quietly and told him that losing the approval of people who only valued appearances was painful, but it also revealed who truly cared. Alexander thought about her words for a long time because he knew they were true. Meanwhile, Alexander wanted Jasmine to understand that her own struggles did not make her less valuable. He had seen how others underestimated her because of her background and appearance. He told her that the way she treated people showed a level of strength that many powerful individuals lacked. Jasmine smiled and admitted that she once believed she needed to become someone else to be respected. But over time, she learned that confidence came from accepting herself. Their conversation brought them closer because they both understood what it felt like to be judged before being understood. However, their growing connection did not go unnoticed. Some people around Alexander began questioning why he spent so much time with Jasmine. They believed someone in his position should choose a partner who matched his status and reputation. They did not understand that Alexander was no longer searching for someone who impressed the world. He was searching for someone who brought peace into his life. Jasmine became that person without trying. She did not enter his world expecting special treatment. She entered it with kindness and sincerity. Alexander realized that the woman who stayed beside him during his most difficult moment was also the person who reminded him of his own strength. For the first time in years, he stopped wondering what he had lost and started thinking about everything he still had. And Jasmine began to understand that the man everyone saw as powerful was also someone who simply wanted to be accepted for who he truly was. As time passed, Alexander Whitmore and Jasmine Carter found themselves facing a new challenge. Their connection had grown stronger, but the world around them was beginning to notice the changes taking place. For years, Alexander had been known as a man who made decisions without hesitation. People respected his confidence and his ability to handle difficult situations. But now, they saw something different. They saw a man who smiled more often, listened more carefully, and allowed someone into a part of his life that had always remained private. Some people admired the change, while others questioned it. They wondered why a powerful mafia boss would choose to spend so much time with a maid who came from a completely different background. They focused on appearances and social expectations, but Alexander no longer allowed those opinions to guide his choices. He had spent enough of his life trying to meet the expectations of others. Jasmine noticed that some people judged her before knowing her, but she refused to let their opinions take away her confidence. She had already experienced being overlooked, and she had learned that her value did not depend on how others viewed her. When Alexander asked if the attention bothered her, Jasmine admitted that it was not always easy. She explained that she understood why people made assumptions because she had lived through years of being underestimated. But she also knew that proving herself to everyone was impossible. The only person she needed to convince was herself. Alexander respected that mindset because it reflected something he had been learning as well. He had spent years believing his worth came from his position, his success, and his ability to remain in control. Jasmine helped him understand that his value existed beyond those things. One evening, Alexander invited Jasmine to attend a private event at the Whitmore estate. He knew some guests might question her presence, but he wanted her to experience the world he lived in and understand that she belonged wherever she chose to stand. Jasmine felt nervous at first, but Alexander reminded her that she was not there because of him. She was there because she deserved to be seen and respected. Throughout the evening, Jasmine remained true to herself. She spoke kindly, treated everyone with respect, and showed a confidence that surprised many people. Some guests who had underestimated her began seeing the qualities Alexander had already recognized. They realized that her strength was not connected to wealth or status. It came from her character. Later that night, Alexander told Jasmine that he admired how she handled everything. She smiled and said she had simply learned not to let other people's opinions decide her happiness. Her words reminded Alexander of how much she had changed his perspective. He had once believed strength meant never needing anyone. Jasmine showed him that real strength could also come from allowing someone to stand beside him. As they looked back on everything that had happened, both of them understood that their connection was no longer based on a single moment of kindness. It was built on countless small moments of trust, honesty, and understanding. Alexander was no longer focused on the life he thought he had lost. He was beginning to appreciate the unexpected path that brought Jasmine into his world. And Jasmine realized that the man everyone saw as powerful had become the person who made her feel valued in a way she had never experienced before. The days following the private event at the Whitmore estate brought a new sense of confidence to Jasmine Carter. She had entered a room filled with people who judged her before knowing her, but she left understanding something important. She did not need to change herself to belong. She only needed to remain true to who she was. Alexander Whitmore noticed that change immediately. He saw how Jasmine carried herself with more confidence, not because others finally accepted her, but because she had accepted herself. For Alexander, that was one of the qualities he admired most. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted to appear strong, but Jasmine showed a different kind of strength. She did not need attention or recognition. Her confidence came from knowing her own worth. Meanwhile, Alexander began facing a truth he had avoided for a long time. He realized that his biggest struggle after the accident was not his new circumstances. It was the belief that his life could never feel complete again. He had allowed one difficult chapter to make him forget every other part of who he was. Jasmine helped him see that his story was still being written. One evening, Alexander and Jasmine sat together in the quiet garden where they often talked. Alexander told her that before meeting her, he believed people would always see him differently. He thought his future would only be defined by what had changed. Jasmine looked at him and reminded him that people who truly mattered would never reduce him to one part of his life. They would see his choices, his kindness, and the way he treated others. Alexander realized that Jasmine had given him something more valuable than comfort. She had given him a new perspective. At the same time, Jasmine began understanding the responsibility that came with Alexander's position. She saw how many people depended on his decisions and how carefully he considered every choice. The world often saw his authority, but she saw the effort behind it. She understood that being powerful did not mean life was easy. Alexander carried pressures that most people never noticed. Their bond became stronger because they both understood each other's hidden struggles. Neither of them was trying to save the other. They were simply two people who had experienced being misunderstood and had found someone who finally saw the truth. However, Alexander knew there was one thing left to face. The woman who had walked away from him on his wedding day had started appearing in conversations again. Sophia Reynolds had heard about the changes in Alexander's life, and she wanted to understand why he had become so different. She had expected him to remain the same man she left behind. Instead, she discovered someone who had found a new kind of confidence. Alexander was no longer searching for approval from people who only valued his success. He had found someone who valued him as a person. When Sophia saw Jasmine beside him, she realized that the woman she once overlooked had become the person Alexander trusted most. For Jasmine, the moment was not about proving anything to anyone. She had already learned her value. For Alexander, it was a reminder that the greatest change in his life did not come from regaining what he lost. It came from discovering what he never knew he needed. Months after the night that changed everything, Alexander Whitmore often found himself thinking about how unexpected his journey had been. There was a time when he believed his life had ended the moment everything he knew was taken away from him. He thought his reputation, his success, and the respect people gave him were the only things that defined him. But Jasmine Carter showed him something he had forgotten. A person's true value was never measured by what they could do for others. It was measured by who they were when life became difficult. Alexander was still respected as the powerful mafia boss he had always been. He still carried responsibilities and made important decisions. But the difference was that he no longer allowed his position to hide the person underneath. Jasmine had helped him understand that accepting support did not mean losing strength. It meant recognizing that even the strongest people deserved someone who understood them. Jasmine's life had also changed in ways she never imagined. She was no longer the woman who quietly stood in the background while others decided her worth. She had discovered confidence, not because her circumstances became perfect, but because she finally understood that she had always been valuable. Alexander never saw her as only a maid. He saw her intelligence, her compassion, and the courage it took for her to remain kind despite everything she experienced. One evening, Alexander and Jasmine returned to the same garden where they had shared many honest conversations. Alexander looked back on the moment when Jasmine first asked him to dance. At the time, he thought she was offering him a simple act of kindness. Now he understood it was something much greater. She had reminded him that he was still capable of experiencing happiness. Jasmine smiled and told him that she never saw him as someone who needed to be fixed. She only saw someone who had forgotten how much he still had to offer. Those words meant more to Alexander than she knew. Their relationship was not built on saving one another. It was built on respect, understanding, and the choice to stand together through every challenge. The people who once questioned them eventually saw the truth. Jasmine did not belong beside Alexander because of his power. She belonged there because she brought something into his life that no amount of wealth or influence could provide: peace. Alexander did not love Jasmine because she stayed when everyone else left. He loved her because she showed him a side of himself he thought was gone forever. She reminded him that he was more than his circumstances, more than his reputation, and more than the expectations others placed on him. Together, they created a life that was not defined by the opinions of others. The woman who was once overlooked became the person who changed the future of the man everyone thought had everything. The man who once believed he had lost his purpose discovered that a new beginning could come from the most unexpected moment. And the dance that started with a simple question became a symbol of the day two people found hope, acceptance, and a love that saw beyond everything the world could see.